one of the benefits that I've gone through in my life is, I've literally now worked and coached for. Kirk's not a Hall of Fame coach yet, but he will be, right? And every coach that I've worked for has been a Hall of Fame coach. So when Hayden was there, we did things a certain way. Kirk had left, come back. A lot of what I saw Kirk go through my first couple of years with him, replacing the legend, is what I did and referenced a lot when I took over at Wisconsin. I was replacing Barry Alvarez, so I had already seen somebody do this, right? We went 1-10 in our first year, 3-9 our second year, and then we broke through into the bowl game my last year and played Texas Tech. Kirk has one unique tool that a lot of people don't realize. Like I always say in this world, everybody can hear, but very few people listen. And Kirk has a unique ability to listen to everyone and take it and process it, and then he won't interrupt you. He'll let you talk, and then he'll arrive at his decision. That's going to be his decision and no one else's. But he really does a great job of listening to people around him. And then I think with that being said, he really doesn't care what other people think, right? He just goes with it. I remember I was coaching a kid by the name of Dallas Clark as a linebacker, and I couldn't get him to play linebacker, right? He could run. He was great on special teams. He was an awesome kid to be around. I'm like, Coach, I think you play tight end. He watched him work out like a week. He goes, yeah, we're moving to a tight end, right? And obviously it ended up being a pretty good decision for everybody involved. But that was another one. We had another defensive lineman, and he saw the way he looked, the way he bent, the way he moved. He literally moved an offensive line, and he became an NFL player, right? Like he just takes the complexity of recruiting out of it and makes it very simple, which is what I learned from him and I still take to this day.
Longevity-wise, how impressive is it that he's been at the same place for 25 years?
Yeah, well, for those of you that know Kirk, he's not a guy that looks for anything beyond what's in front of him, right? Like, takes care of his family. He's got an incredible family, incredible wife, great kids, grandkids now. Back when I was there, I had a houseboat on the Coralville Reservoir, and our slip was like literally right down from Kirk's house. And I knew all I had to do was have some St. Pauli Girl beer in the fridge, because he loved St. Pauli Girl, because he would pop over there every once in a while, and it would just be he and I sitting there, and that was kind of our moment to kind of relax. I love him to death because he gave me an opportunity. I was a young coach. I'd never been anywhere else, and if he let me go, I may never have been able to stay in coaching. And he gave me an opportunity to stay on his staff, and it's been awesome to be back in the league with him. I do remember when I left Wisconsin, I called him. He'd sent me a message or something, and I said, hey, we're talking, and he goes, I'm glad you left, which I thought was kind of funny because he and I had some good battles.
Coach, you're
just want to get your thoughts on your quarterback situation and what is Altmaier showing so far?
Well, first off, our quarterback situation is probably as good as it's been since I've been there. My first year, I had a transfer in Brandon Peters, and then we had Art transfer in, but that was really probably the only type of level of quarterbacks that could win a game for us. So I was very nervous about that year. And last year going into it, I had Tommy, but Art was coming off of surgery. And we had a young Donovan Leary, didn't really have another option that I was feeling good about if things didn't happen, right? And this year now we have obviously Luke that you mentioned. We have John Paddock as a guy that's played college football and a Trent's competitor, and then we have Donovan Leary, who's now 2 years into our program. I'm excited about that room more than I've ever been. The guy that's coaching them, and Barry Lunny, and then we took Art Sikowski, and he has been an incredible voice in our players in so many different ways. And those that are familiar with our program, Art Sikowski came off the bench 3 times in his career and beat Nebraska, Penn State, and Iowa. 3 tough games. And I've never had a quarterback do that more than once, let alone twice, let alone 3 times. And now he's coaching our kids. It's a great combination.
Coach, you're
backing on that question. There's some thought that given your quarterback situation, you can turn up the dial on passing in your run-pass mix. Do you agree with that?
We will do any mix that we need to do to win a game. I think when people hear me and see me talk, they automatically take me back to Wisconsin, and then they take me to replacing Barry Alvarez, and like, we've been throwing the ball and running the ball as efficiently as anybody since I've been coaching. When I was at Wisconsin winning, our magic number, when we ran the ball for 200 and threw the ball for 200, we were like batting like 98% of winning, and we did that quite a bit. Since we've come here to Illinois, my first year offense, we just didn't have our identity, but last year I think in games you could kind of see what we're all about. We actually were one of the most efficient passing. We went from one of the least efficiency passing teams in college football to I think we led the nation like 7 or 8 weeks last year. So we definitely throw the ball around, and You know, now we got some wide receivers. We got this guy that's here with us, Isaiah Williams, caught 83 balls. Anytime you catch 80-plus balls, you're catching a lot of balls. And we got Casey Washington. We got Pat Bryant. We have a young player in Malik Elzy who's turning people's heads. We got a couple tight ends. We'll throw that ball around pretty good.
Bret, as NIL evolves, where does this model go in 2, 3, 4 years as far as compensation and maybe control of your roster too? What does this look like in 5 years?
You know, everybody's got an opinion on NIL. My opinion is this: it's been awesome. Like, it's really, you know, for us, I think these guys here today and some of the guys that could have went to the NFL to have the NIL opportunity. Now, we're not paying them silly money, right? They're not making, some of these kids are making ridiculous money, but these guys are making some money that allows them to stay in school, be comfortable, let their family come to games and be a college football player. And now that money may be rewarded tenfold, right? Like, we had a safety, Kirby Joseph, who was an awesome player who came out, in my opinion, a year too early. He was a 28th pick or 29th pick in the 3rd round. His signing bonus was in the neighborhood of a $3 or $4 million, and then a $3 to $4 million contract. But if he would have stayed a year and been the 29th pick in the 1st round, that signing bonus would have went to over $20 million, and his playing contract would have went to over $15 million. So you're talking about $15 to $20 to $25 million that you never get back by just staying in school. So I think our kids here today, like, they're going to make some money in the draft by staying in school for a year and being good. The NIL stuff that gets frustrating is when it's getting used in recruiting, and that goes on, and it's very frustrating, but it's part of the game that we're dealing with right now. And those that can do it, I wish them all the best of luck, but it ain't happening in Illinois. I've worked my tail off to get the job, and I ain't gonna do anything that makes me lose it.
Coach, in year three, you're playing with more and more of your own recruits. So is this season a little bit more of a measuring stick on the progress that you made and where the program's at?
I get the question, but you know, I didn't ever really view my time here as who recruited who. I kind of said, like, when we came in, like, listen, everybody, it's when I came in that year is unlike any year in college football. They could all leave without penalty because the portal just started, and it was COVID, so they had a bonus year, right? So the way I look at it, we recruited every one of those kids, right? Because they could have left, but you know, the reason Casey Washington left and came back is because when he left and went to Wake Forest, he started calling all his buddies, and they're like, "Hey, you may want to rethink this. These guys know what the hell they're doing. They treat you the right way. They take care of us. They develop us, and that's what brought Casey back, right? So I understand the question, but I don't agree with the math. Is what I'm saying, I guess.
Coach, I wanted to ask about the Week 1 matchup against Toledo. Defending league champions, bring back a dynamic quarterback, a lot of talent on that team. Do you approach them as not necessarily being a typical Group of 5 team?
We actually don't refer to them as Toledo. We just call them back champs, because that should sum up what they need to know, right? If you watch them on film, offensively, their quarterback is an incredibly gifted player, very dynamic in many different ways. Johnny Newton's brother is a phenomenal football player that is impactful in the game. Defensively, they did lose some players, but they're very good. They're well coached. I shouldn't have to teach our guys about them. I think they see it on film. Film is the greatest indicator of what you are, and they're an incredibly talented football team.
Do you draw much on what happened when you were at Arkansas against them in 2015?
Thank you. We lost to Toledo at Little Rock, and that probably was my best Arkansas team. We went 5-3 in league play and beat some pretty good teams, but we couldn't beat Toledo that day. And there probably is a lot of similarities. For sure, actually, because of that game, I have a relationship with Jamie Pollard, and he called me and asked me about another guy that they were looking at hire in Iowa State. I said, "Have you looked at the guy at Toledo?" And then 3 days later, he had the job.
There's a realignment, no more Iowa, Illinois every year. But how will you remember that rivalry?
Well, the good news in the way that the league is set up now, in my understanding, we'll have a chance to play every person in the league on a home and away surface during a 4-year window, right? Obviously, we have Northwestern and Purdue as our protected games. I would have loved to have kept, in my opinion, I was trying to get us to keep Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota and kind of keep our own little Big Ten West thing going, but because I think people like those. And border battles are great, right? Like, they really, I think that's what the Big Ten is about, right? Like, Listen, I would love to go play at USC. I love playing it out on the East Coast, at Penn State and Rutgers, and all that goes into it. But when you got border battles, that just means more. And we're in a day and age where, you're competing against good TVs, right? You're competing against people that want to sit in their living room maybe versus go to a game. And to me, the easiest way to keep people engaged going to games is to give them games that they want to see, right? So I get it. Everybody wants to play Ohio State, USC, and Michigan and all that jazz. I love playing them too, but I love playing, and competing against trophy games and border battles.
Speaking of rivalries, Bret, what's it like now to be a rival with Ryan Walters?
Yeah.
Like, what's that dynamic like?
Yeah, well, you guys follow close enough, right? Like, I've said this all along. I learned this when I went from Iowa to Kansas State. I left Iowa. When I left there, I was crying like a baby, extremely close with Kirk and that staff. And all of a sudden, I'm at Kansas State, and we get in a couple of recruiting battles. And I literally coached the game at Kansas State. We played in the Holiday Bowl in San Diego, and I took a red-eye flight to go watch Iowa play in the Orange Bowl. And I walked into the section of wives that were watching the game, and they all turned their back to me, right? Because they had been told that I was dirty recruiting or something, right? So I learned early on in my career that you lose more friendships in recruiting than you do in the football game, right? And we've battled head-to-head with Purdue, and there's going to be some emotions that come into that, but I really don't think it affects us on game day, as crazy as that is. Listen, Purdue is defending Big Ten champs, and they beat us 2 years in a row, right? And it's my mistake because I put emphasis on teams, but that was a team that I didn't put an emphasis on, right? And I talked about Wisconsin, I talked about Iowa, I talked about Minnesota, I talked about Northwestern, because they had won Big Ten titles, and I didn't really probably give the diligence to Purdue that I should have. So I think this year, yes, Ryan's there, and there's a couple coaches there, but I think our focus on Purdue is more about what's happened the last 2 years than it is about who's there.
Keith, you statement earlier about expectations. How will you measure success? Can you quantify it in terms of X number wins or bust, division crown or bust?
Nope. Success for us defined whether I'm going to be the returning Big Ten champ or if I'm coming back as a guy that had another bowl game. Our seasonal success is based on one premise: we get better every week. If we're better in game 12 than we were in game 1, we're going to be a successful football team. I really pride on how our teams play. That's why last year was such an anomaly for me in my career. Like, I have never really gone through anything that had been through that, where you start 7-1 and go 1-5. My second Big Ten championship here in the championship game, we played Nebraska earlier in the year, and I think we got beat like 24-21. It was a real tight game. We came back here 2 months later, 8 weeks later, 7 weeks wait, and we beat them by, I believe, over 60 or 50 points, right? So I know that we got tremendously better. The year before that, we lost to Michigan State in a tight game. We came here and won the game in a tight game, right? So I think the definition of a great season is if you get better every game.
Johnny and Keith have been tied together so much. Just what have you learned about the two of those guys, like individually?
Johnny and Keith have been tied together?
Well, just, I mean, it's the law firm.
Not physically, yeah.
I don't know.
Today's world.
But just about them individually over the last years.
I think they get a natural pairing just because of the position. Their personalities are huge. I did it, right? I literally in a press conference called them the law firm because I'd kind of like the jingle of Newton and Randolph. But they're both really two different type of players. When I had a good buddy come in and did an analysis of them, and one of the things he came back to me and said was like, as much as these two guys kind of play similar positions, they're really two different type of players, right? And it's exactly spot on. And they've been together. They're good friends, but I think they also have their own unique relationships, their own unique personalities. And when the NFL calls, right, they're probably not going to be on the same team anymore. But I think when they get that opportunity, they're both going to have a tremendous amount of success.
Coach Chase Brown is in the NFL now. So
yeah.
How you feeling about the running game heading into training camp?
Yeah, I get that question: how do you replace Chase Brown? Well, you don't replace Chase Brown, right? What you do is you replace Chase Brown's production, right? And that may come from one guy, it may come from two, it may come from three. I know I got a running back room of 5 running backs that is excited to go out there and show what they can do. Reggie Love and Josh McCray have been waiting for this opportunity and can't wait to take advantage of it. We have 3 freshmen, Jordan Anderson, Aiden Lawfrey, and Caden Fagan, that I think have all some pretty good skill sets. We got some big backs, we got a couple little backs, we got a little bit of guys in between. I'm really excited about this group. It reminds me a lot of a group I was at Wisconsin. We had 2,000-yard rushers, and we had another guy go rush for 998. John Clay was a really big back that was a really good player. He was our leading rusher for like close to 13, 14. James White had like 1,200, and Moneyball had 998. And then there's this guy Melvin Ward that ran for like 500 yards, right? So it was a stacked room that played well when they played their assigned roles together. And I think this room will be a lot like that.
Do you supplement the running game with Isaiah Williams a little bit, you think?
You mean like with jet sweeps and what? Like,
Yes.
you're not going to see Isaiah line up a running back. I mean, there'll be tricks and gadgets, but I think Isaiah, the thing that really jumped out on some of his plays last year, when you use his vertical speed, he's actually a very special player. So we'll find as many ways as we can to get him the ball.
Was there any surprise on your end to see Wisconsin go to an air raid and that type of different offensive shift, just knowing the